So, we are continuing our look through the book of Job. I think last night maybe, we released a video on our social media of Job chapter 15. So, if you are not following us on social media, then if you have it, definitely would take advantage of that. But we went through Job 15, which starts kind of round two of Job's friends giving their wonderful advice and why they think he's in the situation that he's in. And so Eliphaz goes first. They keep the same order, how they went in, scene one is how they go in scene two. And so Eliphaz was speaking to Job. And one thing that you'll notice, we'll dive into it more as we go through these chapters, but one thing that you're going to see is round two was much more harsh. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, it is, when you look at their first speeches compared to their second speeches, at least in the first speeches, there was a little bit of hope and compassion. They hinted around, hey man, if you just repent, God will make this right. But there's none of that in round two. And we're going to look at that a little bit and unpack it more as we keep moving. But Job 16 is where Job is responding to Eliphaz's speech, his second one. So let's pray, and then we're going to go through chapter 16 and 17. We're going to unpack both of them together. So, Father, we thank you for the privilege that it is to be able to be in your house tonight going through this word. I pray, God, that you would open up our eyes to be able to see the truths in your word. I pray, Lord, that you would speak to our hearts, God, and help us to see ourselves, help us to see Christ, help us to learn things about ourselves, learn things about Christ as we go through this book together, Lord. And as we pray every single week, Father, I pray that our roots are a little bit deeper and a little bit stronger when we leave than they were when we came in. In your name we pray, amen. All right, so we're taking both chapters. We're going to take the rest of the book and how they're sectioned off. And so 16 and 17 would go together. And like I said, this is Job responding to Eliphaz. Let's look at the first 5 verses there. It says, "Then Job answered and said, I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. Shall windy words have an end? Or what provokes you that you answer? I also could speak as you do. If you were in my place, I could join words together against you and shake my head at you. I could also strengthen you with my mouth, and the solace of my lips would assuage your pain." And so here's his first response back. And as you're going to see in chapter 16, something that we saw in previous chapters, Job will start out replying to the friend, and then the reply is still towards his friend, but the conversation kind of shifts to God. He's talking to the Lord at a point. And you'll see it in chapter 16. It's Eliphaz, it goes to the Lord, and then it goes back to Eliphaz. And so that's kind of common as we go through the rest of these chapters. But he starts out and he says, I have heard many such things. This is his response. So this is the response from chapter 15, but seems to be a more direct response from verses 17 and 18. So from chapter 15, because in the previous chapter, Eliphaz basically implies that Job is full of hot air. Almost literally says those words. You're just, we're giving you this advice that we feel like is from God. You're giving us these responses, but your responses are just hot air. And so that's why I think it kind of makes that implication there. And he says, I've heard many such things. Eliphaz basically in the previous chapter says, we have a ton of experience. All that we have seen and all that we have heard tells us why you're going through these troubles. It tells us why you're going through all the stuff that you're going through. And conventional wisdom teaches it as well. And so he thinks because of all of that, he's qualified to speak on Job's condition. Job basically replies and says, yeah, I've heard all this stuff too. Conventional wisdom would tell you, A, B, and C. If A plus B equals C type thing. But as I put in the notes, sometimes if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, acts like a duck, swims like a duck, could be a duck-billed platypus. Doesn't mean it is a duck. It could be a platypus. So sometimes just because everything may look one way, it doesn't mean that it is. All signs may be pointing towards something, but that doesn't mean you're going to have this expected outcome. We may think we understand a situation or can perceive how God is working, but at the end of the day, we are finite and sinful creatures gazing upon the work of an infinite and holy God. So there's always going to be a piece of the puzzle, the picture that we're just not going to understand. And even if he told us, we still wouldn't understand it, right? Remember last year when we walked through the whole book of Revelation, towards the end, how many times did John go, I'm looking at something and I can't comprehend it. You've even told me what it is. I still can't understand it. And so there's just a part of God's holiness that we are not going to be able to drink in fully. We're not going to be able to have that knowledge because he's holy, he's sinless, he's blameless, and we are not. And so Job's friends, Eliphaz here, basically says, no one goes through the punishment you've gone through without it being the direct, retribution hand of God. And Job the whole time proclaims and stands on his innocence. I've done nothing. I've done nothing to deserve all of this. I've not been, as dishonest and hateful as you three have said I've been. And so this isn't a duck. This is a platypus. It may look like all of it, but it's just not what the friends are saying. And so he calls them, the very next part, he says, you miserable comforters are you all. In this second round of speeches by Job's friends, they dial up their unevidenced accusations. Unevidenced accusations. They're just firing things out with zero proof behind it. And Job does the same with his rebuttal. He dials it up. Job is probably wishing that he could return to his friends being the quiet comforters when they first showed up. And they just kind of sat there with them. That was probably a lot better than what they're spouting out. And here's, I misspoke earlier. This is the part where I meant to say it. He says, shall windy words have an end? This looks to be a response to Eliphaz basically telling Job that he's full of hot air. In chapter 15, verse 2, he basically says, you're full of hot air, and he seems to fire back. Job turns the insult back on to Eliphaz and accuses him of being full of hot air. And then he says, when does it end? When does this, nothingness and these false accusations, when is it they're actually going to end? You're miserable comforters. You're full of hot air. I like what Job does here. Job says, I could speak as you do. If I was in your position, if these tables were turned, I could speak to you like you're speaking to me. He rolls through all of that. I could throw out accusations. I could, but here's the thing about Job. Knowing what he knows now, his accusations actually have proof. He could accuse them of being harsh and not being compassionate and not being thoughtful, and they have been, and you're going to see it even more as we walk through this book. But Job says this. Job says, but I would strengthen, comfort, and encourage you during your trial. And instead of doing to you what you're doing to me, if these tables were turned, I would not be speaking as you're speaking. I would be... what he says, I would strengthen you with my mouth, and the solace of my lips would assuage your pain. So he would lighten that load for them. One thing that our own trials accomplish in us that it makes is that it makes us more sympathetic to those going through trials themselves of our own. And so the trials that we go through, the things that we face on a daily basis, they make us more sympathetic when we see people in similar situations. When I was putting all this stuff together, one thing that I remembered is, especially growing up and getting older and, getting more wisdom, you don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you don't even know the questions to ask. And I don't know how many times, being in my young 20s or whatever, and just something random would come up and I would need to go out like to Target or Walmart at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, right before they closed, to grab something. And I'd be walking down the aisle trying to find just whatever the need was. And I would hear like a baby crying. And my first response would be like, why has a mama got her baby out this late? Man, when I have kids, da, 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 da. And then the first one comes along and we're in Walmart at 11:30 at night trying to get diapers and formula. You know what I mean? It's like you don't know until you're there. And this is the case with Job's friends. You are trying to speak on things that you have no knowledge about. And that's one of the things that we are, want to be sensitive toward, especially going through the book of Job, because while it's true that we all are going to face trials of some type, not everybody in their life experience has gone through something truly just crushing on every level: mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, financial, everything that it can touch, it has crushed. And so we are not going to stand up here and pretend like we have and say, I've been where you are. No, we're not going to do that. But we're going to look at what happened to Job. We're going to observe the conversation around it, what his friends did, how we can learn from that. And I'm going to hit a point here in just a minute to kind of go through it. Sometimes you're in a place to give advice, but sometimes you're in a place where you just need to be quiet. You just need to be there and not say a word. And so, but we're going to, I don't want to get too far ahead. We're going to specifically look at something in just a second. So he fires back at Eliphaz, you're horrible comforters. And if I were in your position, I would be trying to encourage, not make it 100 times worse. And so we move to the next section. Let's look at, I'm going to read a little bit here and then kind of break some stuff down. This is the part of his speech where he's still addressing Eliphaz, but it kind of turns towards God. Now he's kind of talking to the Lord at this point. If I speak, my pain is not assuaged. And if I forbear, how much of it leaves me? Surely now God has worn me out. He has made desolate all my company, and he has shriveled me up, which is a witness against me, and my leanness has risen up against me. It testifies to my face. He has torn me in his wrath and hated me. He has gnashed his teeth at me. My adversary sharpens his eyes against me. Men have gaped at me with their mouth. They have struck me insolent on the cheek. They mass themselves together against me. God gives me up to the ungodly and casts me into the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, and he broke me apart. He seized me by the neck and dashed me to pieces. He set me up as his target. His archers surround me. He slashes open my kidneys and does not spare. He pours out my gall on the ground. He breaks me with breach upon breach. He runs upon me like a warrior. I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin and have laid my strength in the dust. My face is red with weeping, and on my eyelids is deep darkness. Although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. And so we see Job is now back into, this is what the Lord is doing to me, and he is still proclaiming his innocence. My hands, there's no violence. My prayer is pure. Job's not perfect. We talked about the difference between being righteous and blameless. Job's not perfect, but he is right. We don't see anything, especially to the level that these friends are accusing him of things that he's done to deserve this. And so he says in this first part here, if I speak, my pain is not assuaged. If I forbear, it doesn't leave me. Job is saying that while both he and his friends remained silent, remember when they first showed up, no speaking. While they were silent, he was in pain. Now that both he and his friends are speaking, he's still in pain, right? Nothing has brought him comfort. If I stay quiet, I'm in pain. If I speak, I'm in pain. Nothing is bringing me comfort here. There are many ways to handle pain and suffering. Some keep silent, internalizing everything and just push through. Some choose to be very vocal, get everything out in the open, get everything off their chest. Job has tried both. Neither has worked. He sat there in silence and has just suffered. And then when the speaking goes on, he has suffered still. And he says, he has made desolate all my company. Now, Job is also a very poetic book, so at times it's difficult to know exactly who he's referring to or what he's speaking of. But Job is, in this passage, what I feel like, Job is probably referring to both his family and his friends. All of his children are gone, and his friends are offering no comfort at all. The ones that did show up, we could probably make a pretty good argument that it'd been better if they'd have just kind of stayed home. Or right before they started speaking, just excused themselves. But here's a common thing that we see here. He says, God has torn me, he has hated me, and he has gnashed his teeth at me. Satan will use anything he can to get our understanding of God to change. One of the devices that he'll use is blessing. Many people forget God in their times of blessing. I put this down. Since our daily bread seems to be readily available, we no longer feel the need to pursue God in prayer for its distribution. Give us this day our daily bread. That's when you need it and when you don't. That's all the time. And when our cupboards are bare, it's easy to seek God for daily bread. But when the cupboards are full, we seem to kind of take a step back. We don't need to be as pursuant because we feel like we have no need. And so a lot of the times, the reason that it seems like blessing gets withheld is because it ends up being the downfall. And reference Genesis through Revelation. Pick a book and read it. And it's in every book almost. When there's abundant blessing, a lot of the times we tend to feel like we don't need him as much. And the devotion slacks off, and the fellowship slacks off, and the Bible study slacks off, and the prayer slacks off. But then when the needs come back, they tend to come back as well. And so blessing can be one of the things that the enemy uses to distort our perception of God. Another device the enemy will use to distort our view of God is times of testing. Job feels like God is actively against him, actively hates him, and is punishing him. In actuality, it is the hand of God that is actively keeping the situation from getting worse. We're going to point one thing out here in just a second that I want you to see through the book of Job. If you haven't realized it yet, I hope this light turns on, and then for you and me personally as well. Job doesn't realize that God is actually the one. Yes, hardship has come, but God's hand is keeping it from being much worse, and it could get much worse. Ephesians 6:12, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. We do have an enemy, but it is not God. He is not the one actively against Job, hating him, punishing him. That's not the case. But in Job's trials and his torment, his view, I want you to see this. It's not shifted. He's fighting. We talked about it some last week, and we're all in that same place. We all, at one time or another, have probably been through a trial, through a very difficult season. And on Monday and Tuesday, full of faith, God's going to call, ring, show up any second, and this whole thing's going to turn. I know it. Wednesday, why does God hate me? Why does he hate me? And Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's just the downward slope. Then Saturday, Sunday, we've all been through that. That's not wavering. That's not being back and forth, to and fro. That's a fight of faith. You're just fighting through these attacks. And you see it with Job. Job is fighting. He says, this is the part I wanted to dive into a little bit here that I think can be helpful in these situations. He says, men have gaped at me. They massed themselves together. Another component of Job's suffering is that it's been out in the public. It's not been a private battle. It's not been something that only he is going through. This is a very public trial that he is facing. And if you want to take something that's small and magnify it, get 500 of your closest friends involved. Get 25 of your closest friends involved. Like it starts to blow up. And this is what's happening here. He says, men are coming by looking at me and their mouths just gape open. They can't even say anything. They're just shocked. And not only that, they are going to gather people. They are massing themselves just to come and look at what I've been going through. His suffering has been very, very public. And it's, people are literally coming around to look at the disaster that's going on. And so I was sitting there like getting all this together, and I just saw like this quick picture of what this reminds me of. And so let me go ahead and preference this. This is to make a point so we kind of understand this is not a broad stroke of, hey, this is what these people do. This is just like a little parable to get us to see. So Revelation talks about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. This is the 4 horsemen of an accident. Okay, when there's like a car wreck or some type of accident, you got 4 people that show up, and this is kind of what I see in Job's story. You've got the ambulance, you've got the officer, you've got the agent, and you've got the onlooker. Those are the 4 people that show up, at times during like a car accident. The ambulance, here to help, just here to help with what happened. The officer shows up, they have to find out what happened. Okay, the agent, like your insurance agent would show up. We need to find out who to blame for what happened, who's at fault. And then the onlooker, we're just here to see what happened. All 4 are needed. You need the ambulance there to help work on whatever issues. You need the police officer there to figure out, let's get the story. What happened? What's going on? You need the agent. You need to find out, can we get you help and get this covered? You need that. And you need the onlooker. I saw what happened. I was here. I'm a witness. You need all 4 of those. But we need the discernment to know which times we need to be those things, right? If there's an open wound and somebody's bleeding out, you don't need somebody over them going, all right, just calm down. Tell me what happened. That can come later. Right now, let's get compression started. Let's cover this thing up. So all 4 are needed. We just need to know when we need to be these things. In the case of Job needs somebody there. Job needs somebody there to comfort him, physically comfort him. Buddy, I know I'm going to say this and you're just going to punch me in the face, but I believe it is going to get better. I know that's probably the last thing you want to hear, but I'm here just to be a comfort and an encouragement. You also need the officer to show up. What happened? Can we try to pinpoint? If you're blameless, I believe you're blameless. But if there's a hidden sin, let's investigate to figure out what is going on. Maybe not needed right when you show up, but needed. And all these other ones too, onlookers, and all of this stuff is needed when we're helping. We just need to have the discernment to know, when do I just need to sit and be silent? When do I need to start asking questions to get to the heart of the matter? And when do I just need to go, I don't care what happened. I don't care if it was your fault, his fault, that fault, this fault. I'm just here to help. Let's just get the bleeding to stop. And then once you're good, then we'll dive into these other things. But at some point, you just need to be there to help. And even in the first round of Job's friends showing up, yes, it says they were there to comfort and mourn with him, but they never offered just help. It went from, here's why you're going through this, here's how to stop it. Round 2 is, you're just a horrible person. There was never a place where any of them were just helping. And a lot of the times, especially if you are there trying to console someone that is going through something that you yourself have never gone through, just help. And there's nothing wrong with saying, brother, I have never been in a situation like this, so I'm coming to you. How can I help you? If you just want me to sit here, I'll sit here. If you just need to be alone, I'll leave and I'll text you tomorrow morning. You know what I mean? If you haven't been through that and you haven't gotten this comfort from the Holy Spirit to share and be able to help, ask the individual. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes, I think as we can see with Job, sometimes it's better to be quiet than it is to try to offer advice that just, is a whole lot worse than the alternative. So you need all 4 of those. You need the ambulance, the officer, the agent, and the onlooker. But we also need discernment to know when we need to be which one. Everybody understand? All right, cool. Verses 10 through 17, we do this in every single chapter. Where is Jesus? Well, Jesus is right here. He pops up a few times. In verses 10 through 17, we see a prophetic picture of Jesus. In verse 10, this is Job talking about his situation. You can see Christ in it. Men have gaped at me and massed themselves together. His crucifixion was not private. It was very public, and everybody was there. And it even says that, his visage was marred like no other man. I mean, there were people there gaping at just how bad it looked. Verse 11, you've cast me into the hands of the wicked, right? The Roman soldiers and the Jews that were against him came after him. Set me up, he says, you have set me up as his target. God is a just God. He has to deal and punish sin. And when Jesus took the sins of the world on his shoulders, that wrath had to go somewhere. And it didn't come to us. It went to the target. It went to who it was supposed to go to make a way for all of us to, be able to have salvation. His archers surround me. This is like the third time Job has said that. I feel like you've got heavenly archers and you've put the target on me. All that punishment, the spear in the side, the whips, they were directed at him. They were directed at Christ. He breaks me. His body was broken. I mean, the Bible literally says like no other man has been broken before. He says, I have laid my strength in the dust. I mean, there wasn't an ounce of anything left when Christ breathed his last breath. He had literally given it all. My face is red with weeping. Father, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I mean, even on the cross, he's crying out, Lord, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Father, why have you forsaken me? Like he's weeping and he's crying out. And what Job says is also true of Christ. No violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. There was nothing that he intentionally did that was sinful. He willingly, voluntarily took our sin. But it's not because he was sinful. He took that. There was no violence in his hand. It actually says that he was being led like a sheep before the slaughter. He did not open his mouth. And there were 100 things wrong with that whole scenario, and he could have called out any one, but he chose not to. So you see Jesus here. Hebrews chapter 4, 15 and 16. Why do I take the time to bring all of that stuff out? Hebrews 4, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. You may read through the New Testament and go, Jesus didn't go through what I went through. He's not trying to say he's gone through every type of situation that we have, but the temptations and the struggles, he's faced it. That's why, it literally means that we don't serve a high priest who doesn't know what it feels like to be tempted, who doesn't know what it feels like to be exhausted, to be tried, to be, all these emotions that we go through. In some way or another, he has experienced them. Whether it's a personal attack, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a friend, he went through it. And Job was, as we'll see in a minute, was hoping for somebody like that. But I love verse 16. It doesn't matter if these trials and these consequences, these circumstances that we face as Christians, if they're at the hand of you, somebody else, or just an unforeseen circumstance, we can still go to the throne of God because he's paid that price. And look at what it says we can do. We can receive mercy and find grace. I love that it puts mercy and grace in the same passage, like 2 words apart. Mercy is you getting something that you don't deserve. Grace is you not getting something that you do deserve. And you get both at the throne. Instead of receiving justice, we receive mercy, right? And we find his grace. Those things that should come to us do not come to us. He has paid all of that. And so you see Jesus laid out right here in verses 10 through 17. This last little section, everybody good so far? Good? This last little part here in chapter 16. O earth, cover not my blood, and let my cry find no resting place. Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and he who testifies for me is on high. My friends scorn me. My eye pours out tears to God, that he would argue the case of a man with God. Or another translation says, who would argue the case of a man with God? As a son of man does with his neighbor. For when a few years have come, I shall go the way from which I shall not return. Let's take a look at that. O earth, cover not my blood. So this is, again, Job stating his innocence. If he dies in his suffering, he doesn't want his blood seeping and disappearing into the ground. Let his blood be a witness to his innocence. Genesis chapter 4, verses 10 and 11. And the Lord said, this is Cain and Abel, and the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. So it was a witness that Cain had done something wrong and killed Abel, and Job is saying the same thing. If I end up dying in this suffering because I'm just standing on my innocence, that I have not done these things that these people said I have done, don't let my blood seep into the ground. Let it stay here as a witness that I am innocent, right? And then he says this. Now we see Jesus again. Even now, behold, he says, my witness is in heaven. So as we talked about before, we see the familiar fight, as in the previous chapters, of Job wrestling, working through his faith during, or wrestling, working through his faith during his predicament. A few verses earlier, Job spoke of God being actively against him and attacking him. Now, Job says that he knows God is in heaven as his witness, and God will testify for him. You see that battle. You see that back and forth of he just hits these, just like we all do. He hits these spaces of God is against me. His archers are all pointed at me. He's coming at me like a warrior. And then his faith is churning, and God's sustaining hand will not let him go. And he says, but I know I've got a witness in heaven. I know God will testify of me whenever I do see him, that I am innocent. I have not done what these people said I have done. And you see this it's a fight. And if you've been saved more than 15 seconds, you know faith is a fight. It is a fight for anything and everything. You have got to just have that good fight of faith. He says, oh, that there would be someone who would argue the case of man with God. Job is saying, I wish there were someone that would speak on my behalf. You know, like a mediator or an advocate maybe, right? 1 Timothy 2:5, for there is one God and there is one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus. 1 John 2:1, my little children, I am writing these things to you so that you may not sin. But if anyone does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. He's just looking ahead and trusting in what we look back on and trust in, Jesus. He's looking ahead saying, I know I've got a witness in heaven. I need somebody to go between me and God and mediate this thing. And he is prophetically here putting his hope and putting some faith in someone to come, which is Jesus. So that's chapter 16. He's still responding. Chapter 17, let's take a look at that. Different chapter, same theme. We keep on going. He just got finished talking about what? Hope, a future, Jesus, a mediator, an advocate, somebody's coming. But we see that fight is still there, because look at how chapter 17 starts out. My spirit is broken. My spirit is broken. My days are extinct, or they're coming to an end. The graveyard is ready for me. Surely there are mockers about me, and my eye dwells on their provocation. He says, my spirit is broken. Job sounds extremely defeated. This is what I want us to see. I don't know why it took me 17 chapters to see this, but when I was going through it and getting my stuff down, I just saw it. I mean, the Word of God is alive. It's active. You're going to read the same book, the same verse 100 times, and you're going to probably get a handful of things different almost every time you read it. And just something turned on when I saw this. Job sounds extremely defeated, but he is still fighting. He addresses his friends as mockers, and speaks of how he can hear the echoes of their provocation. That's all he's hearing at this point. It's just their insults, and it's over and over and over and over and over. The thing that kind of turned on, it comes here in just a second. We ain't got there quite yet. It's in the next point, or the next verse here. We'll ask the question here, but answer it in chapters to come. How did Job's friends go from, I'm here to comfort and mourn with you in Job chapter 2, to being mockers in Job 17? Job chapter 2 doesn't say, and his friends showed up to make matters worse. It didn't say that his friends showed up to kick him while he was down. I mean, it translates different ways, but the idea is they showed up to mourn with him and comfort him. How did we go from my intentions are to mourn with you and comfort you to, especially in round 2, I'm here to make sure that your last days on earth are as miserable as possible, and you know exactly how bad you are, exactly what God is doing, that you are just, I mean, guys, it gets bad. It gets really bad. I mean, his kids are gone, and Bildad and Zophar bring that up, I can't remember that last guy's name. I think it's Zophar. They bring that up about his kids. I mean, they get ruthless with Job. How did we go from I'm here to comfort to I'm here to tear you down? So I want you to ponder it. I want you to think about it. We're going to answer it in future chapters, not here. Let's let it build, but think about that. And then, just think about that. Just think about that. Look at 3 through 5. Lay down a pledge for me with you. Who is there who will put up security for me? Since you have closed their hearts to understanding, therefore you will not let them triumph. He who informs against his friends to get a share of their property, the eyes of his children will fall. I'll talk about what that is. We see the fight. At the end of chapter 16, I need a mediator. I need an advocate. I need somebody to stand in my place. Chapter 17, we start out of the gate. I'm broken. I'm desolate. My days are numbered. They're extinct. He goes through that. Then the very next part, I need somebody to put up security for me. I need somebody on my side. I need somebody there to help me. He says, lay down a pledge. Who is there to put up security for me? Again, this is the pattern of fighting faith. Right after Job declares that his spirit is broken and his days are numbered, he cries out to God for help. And again, we see a foreshadowing of Jesus. Jesus is the pledge. Jesus is the security. He's speaking in like legal terms. Jesus is the one who stands with Job and will announce his release because the price has already been paid. He's the security that Job is asking for. He's the one that will stand in his place. He's the one that will advocate for him. Look at what he says next. He says, since you have closed their hearts to understanding, therefore you will not let them triumph. Job understood that God could have revealed his innocence to his 3 friends, but this is a part of the suffering that God is also allowing. But here's where the light turned on. Is God allowing Job to go through all of this? Yes, plain as day. He lays out the parameters of what Satan can and cannot do. So he is still in complete control, just allowing. Now, I'm not trying to put that on any other type of suffering. I'm not trying to say the things you've gone through, that's what's going on. We are looking at this story and what we see here, drawing things from it that could be applicable to what we go through. But in this story, it is clear God is not causing, but he is allowing. And I don't know about you, but I know me personally, what I have done, I have gone through this book in times past and now kind of, laying it out for everyone, focusing on what God has allowed, the suffering. And we bring it up in every chapter. I'll be honest with you, like by the time I get in here on Wednesday nights, it's almost like when we're going through Revelation, like I'm mentally drained. This is a tough book. This is a lot to go through day in and day out and getting just these things together. It's very taxing. And that's what we can focus on. But what I have failed to see is that, yes, God is allowing all of this, but God is also sustaining in all of this. He is sustaining Job every step of the way. He is still here. He still has his mind about him. Yes, he gets these dark valleys, but you see in about every chapter or so, he cries out for a mediator. He says, I know I've got a hope in heaven. So while these trials and these things are going on, and they've been going on, and we've gone through things, and maybe you have been going through things, you're still here. You are still here. So even if it's a case where God's allowing, it does not mean he is not still sustaining. He still has you. He is still leading. He is still guiding. He is sustaining Job. I put that in there. Our focus with the story of Job can sometimes lean more towards what God is allowing, and we lose sight on how God is sustaining. He says this last part of verses 3-5. He who informs against his friends to get a share of their property, the eyes of his children will fail. So this is an ancient proverb that they would have understood. It basically says that if someone falsely slanders someone else, and it went to court, it went to trial, that their children could end up paying the price. If these accusations are being thrown out and there's no proof, then the children could be brought in to help pay the price on whatever sentence was handed down. And that's what Job says. These claims are false. I'm getting pelted with things I'm responsible for, but there's no proof. It's hot air. It's meaningless words. And so let's finish up here. Verses 6-9. He has made me a byword of the peoples, and I am one before whom men spit. See this fight again? From the end of 16 to almost all of 17, it's like this. It's just, he's fighting. He has made me a byword of the peoples, and I am one before whom men spit. My eyes have grown dim from vexation, and all my members are like a shadow. The upright are appalled at this, and the innocent stirs himself up against the godless. Yet the righteous holds to his way, and he who has clean hands grows stronger and stronger. We see that fight in this one text here. So verses 6-8. I'm a byword of the peoples. Men spit at me. I've grown dim from vexation. Job has become an object of scorn. That's what he feels like. His body is so shriveled and disease-stricken that he feels as though he is nothing more than a shadow. At this point, all of just what his body, like his physical body has gone through, he basically says, I'm a shadow right now. I'm just, not only like a shadow of my former self, but he literally feels like that's all that's left of me. Upright men, he says, upright men are appalled that something like this could happen to a man. Upright men they're just appalled at this. But verse 9, yet the righteous holds to his way, and he who has clean hands grows stronger and stronger. Fighting faith. We see it again. Even though Job feels like he has dwindled down to nothing but a shadow, he stands on the foundation that he is righteous, and he will eventually grow stronger and stronger. That's what he says. We see the same lesson here with Job that is true for us today. You may be fighting, you may be struggling, you may be battling, you may be warring, but you are also enduring. You're also still here. You may be weak and tired and feel like the next breath is the last breath, but you're still here. He is still helping us and causing us to endure. You will get through whatever it is that you're going through. And this is kind of the ambulance part of it. We're not here to dissect. We're not here to onlook. We're not here to find out what happened and why. It's just encouragement. Whatever it is that you're going through, if you've been battling it for the last 2 days, 2 years, or 2 decades, you're still here. You're still here. He has kept you this entire time, even when it didn't feel like it, and even when it doesn't feel like it. Nevertheless, we are enduring. He is bringing us through this. He is helping us through. And so that's what Job ends up in the last few verses there saying. Then 10-16, we end out chapter 17. But you, come on again, all of you, and I shall not find a wise man among you. My days are past, my plans are broken off, the desires of my heart. They make night into day. The light, they say, is near to darkness, If I hope for Sheol, the grave, if I hope for Sheol as my house, if I make my bed in darkness, if I say to the pit, you are my father, and to the worm, my mother or my sister, where then is my hope? Who will see my hope? Will it go down to the bars of Sheol? Shall we descend together into the dust? You see, again, poetic type writing, and you see the back and forth. I shall not find, he says, I shall not find a wise man among you. Come on again. I think Job is directing this towards his friends. The Bildad is getting ready to hop up and, try to comfort him. And I think he kind of sees Eliphaz like sitting down, and Bildad's getting ready to go. And he's like, well, before you get started, let me throw this one in there. Come on again. You went round 1. You're about to go round 2. Come on, round 3. When you're done, guess what? There's no wise men among you. You're gonna say the same mess that he said the first time. You're just gonna be on copy and paste. There is not wisdom among you anywhere. And he tosses that out there. 11 through 16, we see that fight again. This chapter ends with seemingly, again, it's poetic language, but it is seemingly mixed feelings about death. And remember, we covered that last week. Job is a little unsure about the afterlife as far as like heaven. You see some questions there about just his understanding of it. Remember, he can't go and grab the Bible and flip through and read, right? And so he doesn't have a very clear. It's a muddied picture. But this chapter ends with seemingly mixed feelings about death. At first, it seems like Job welcomes it. Job says, like talking about his distress and the pain that he's in, they make night into day, almost to say, if I'm in the night of suffering, death would bring light. It seems like that's what he's trying to say. If this suffering has just brought darkness to me, then let me lay down in Sheol and let light come. Just let the page turn. That's what it seems like he's saying. He talks about being as close to death as far as relationships goes, as he would be a family member due to his tragic state. The pit, the grave, is as close to him as a father or a mother or a sister. I mean, he's been going through this a long time. Like he even says, he mentions it several times, like his physical body is deteriorating. So he's really going through a lot. He says it's diminishing. And so he's been in this pit, this grave for a while. He says, I'm as close to it as I would be a mother, a father, or a sister. Hoping for relief in death is unsettling to Job, as we see in verse 15, when he says, where then is my hope? Job doesn't want to put his hope in death, but he wants a hope after death. He wants to know that, and I've mentioned it, good gracious, a bunch of times. And I see this position here with Job when he's fighting for his faith and he's kind of on that upward trial there. A lot of the times, we as Christians, especially in our culture, a lot of the times we really struggle and we fight because we are trying to make this life as good as the next one. And it was never meant to be that way. And it's the reason why a lot of Christians around the world that are actively being persecuted for their faith on a daily, weekly basis, why it seems like they have more joy than we do, because they know something better is coming. This is not, we talked about it last week. If we had hope of this life only, we'd be of most men miserable. And they know that they have hope beyond this life. But somewhere in our culture, in our theology, we get this idea that, Christ has come to make our life on earth just a shade below what heaven's going to be like. And it's just simply not true. And so Job, he says, me laying down in the grave might turn my night into day, but he's really wanting something beyond that. And he said it all through chapter 16 and 17. And so this kind of ends chapter 17. He finishes speaking to Eliphaz. 18 picks up. We continue on with the story. I think I actually 18 was a podcast that me and Miguel Sullivan did together, and he brings out a really good point. A really good point. I'll tease you. I think he does it. We had a lot of conversation. I can't remember what was recorded and what wasn't, but Miguel brought something out in the session that we did. This will post tomorrow, and then what me and Miguel did will post next Tuesday, chapter 18. But he brought out the fact that when Satan goes before God, and he's basically trying to see how close he can touch Job, God gives him the parameters. You can basically do anything you want to but take his life. You can touch his family, you can touch his possessions, you can touch his body, you just can't take his life. And again, the focus seems to be on Job and Job alone. But there are 3 other people in this picture that are also free game. God never told Satan that he couldn't touch Job's friends. And so I think we talk about that a little bit, but they are also in the picture and also can be a vessel. So like I said, if you don't follow us on social media, try to do that, because this will be posted tomorrow. The session with me and Miguel on Job 18 will be posted probably on Tuesday. And then we'll be back in here next Wednesday night, same time, same place, and we're going to cover Job chapter 19. So if you want to read ahead, we will cover Job 19. I believe that is Bildad pops up and gives his speech in Job 18, and then in Job 19, Job responds to Bildad, and we'll talk about that. So
that just basically fulfills 17 verse 10.
Say that one more time.
He just fulfills 17 verse 10.
Yeah.
But come on, all of you, try again. I won't find a wise man among you. Bildad proves him right.
Yeah. And if that wasn't enough, when he sits down, the last friend gets up and says, let me go ahead and double down and prove you extra right. But I do want you to see this, though, and keep that question in mind that we're going to slowly unpack. And there's, again, I don't think that there is like one right answer. I want you to read it, pray about it, dig into it. What happened to these 3 friends that morphed them from comforters and mourners into active attackers? I mean, you go back and look at the scope of it. In the first 3 rounds of speeches, there's a little bit of, hey, here's what you've probably done to deserve this, but there was compassion. They weren't really super harsh, and they even told him like ways you could repent. But this second round, they go after his kids. They go all in. There is no compassion. What happened?
I think the question is faith, because the last verse in 18 is surely such a dwelling of an evil man, such is the place of a man that does not know God. Are they taking out of context essentially everything that he's saying in these 2 chapters?
So to jump ahead a little bit, I think that's part of it. I think one of the reasons that you have such a transition from a mourner to an attacker is because every single time that they throw out like an accusation and they stop, Job replies. And we've even seen in earlier chapters, I think it was last week, chapter 15 maybe, and I think we bring it out again in later chapters, they think that they are God's messengers. They think that they are bringing words of righteousness. And so putting ourselves in the story, now let's do devil's advocate, and let's say that we are the friends. Let's say that you are giving advice to somebody and you really think that you're hearing from God and you're giving them godly advice, and the only thing you're getting back is you're wrong, no proof. At some point, something's going to turn, and it's going to be like, well, fine then. You don't want my help? Here's what you are, blah, 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 and you're just probably going to explode. I think something like that is happening. There's probably a lot of things going on, but I think that's part of it as well, that they are hearing these rebuttals from Job you have no proof that I've done any of these things. You know, you don't live with me. You're not here. And I think they are hearing his response, and it's just churning something in them. It's either with Miguel or another video that I did that I bring that out. I'll wait till you guys watch that. But I stopped and asked myself the question, because I don't want to go through this and go, man, Job's friends are horrible. But me close a blind eye to how many times I've been Job's friend to somebody else. You know, I've been in the position where I feel like I'm Job and getting advice that's just not accurate, but I've probably been in the position of Job's friends and telling somebody something that's just completely not right as well. And so I asked myself that question. What happens in my heart when I do not get the response I think I should get? What happens? Do I turn into Job's friends? Is it easy for me to take the side of Job right now because I'm not being accused of anything and I'm presenting the message? What happens if I go through 3 or 4 different relational situations where I'm giving the advice and it's not being received? What happens in my heart? Because I probably act a little bit more like Eliphaz and Bildad than I do Job, if I'm going to be completely honest. And so just look through that, ponder that. Like I said, next Tuesday, we will have the video for Job chapter 18. And then next Wednesday, we'll be back in here and we'll cover Job 19.
So that's just under Bethel Church?
Yeah, if you just go to Facebook, Bethel, I think you might have to, it's Bethel Church. Make sure, I don't know if like Goldsboro is in the name of it, but there's a few Bethel churches. So you'll see it. You'll know it when you see us. Just follow that, and they'll upload it there.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Just because I'm not familiar enough, but as we're going, and I'm just not getting back. We're seeing where we can probably identify with Bildad or any of the other friends, where we think we're trying our best and we're trying to be a good friend, but we're clearly failing.
Yeah.
And we can look at we've experienced these situations where we have been Job talking to somebody else, like, dude, you just don't understand.
Yeah.
Or maybe we're that and we're just not wise enough. Is there a lesson or is there a climax, because I would like to believe in the world of writing, that there is some sort of direction to tell somebody how to be that good friend?
I think you will see that when we get closer to the end of the book, and then after all of these friends have said their thing and Job's given his rebuttal, and then God shows up. And God says, let me take about 5 chapters to speak. I think you see one thing already that we kind of covered a little bit is, you know, having, and I think you even alluded to it when you asked the question, is having the wisdom and the discernment to know when not saying anything is saying plenty. I can't remember who said it, but silence can often be misquoted, but it can never, no, silence can often be misinterpreted, but never misquoted. And so I think it's understanding when we need to be silent, like they did in the first week, 10 days that they were sitting with Job. And then the times where maybe we need to come in and offer, man, if I walk up on somebody and they're covered in boils and they're literally scraping their skin just to get that hurting infection off of them, and you literally have animals around going, this guy's about to die, and when he does, we're going to come in and do what animals do to people. You know, if you walk up on that situation, probably not the best time to go, let's figure out how you got here. No, let's bandage you up. let's stop the hurt. You know what I mean? So I think we kind of see things throughout, but then I think it gets a little bit more direct when God shows up, because He kind of addresses everybody. He even has Job in all that he has faced to say, you know what, brother? As much as you probably don't want to do it, I need you to minister and forgive your friends. I don't need you to sit here and hold grudges, because that bitter root inside of you, if it festers long enough, it will turn you into them and you won't even know it, because you're going to comfort that little thing and it's going to be a beautiful flower, but it's bitter and it's poison. So I think you do see a lot of that, as we kind of move forward. So thank you guys. Right at 8 o'clock. So again, this will be posted tomorrow. Chapter 18 next Tuesday, and then we'll be back in here physically together next Wednesday, covering chapter 19. So thank you guys. Love y'all. If I can help with any way, let me know.